Param Brahma Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Hari Om. Hello and welcome. Thank you for joining me today on this little brief introduction on yoga and the Yoga Sutras. So some of you may be wondering what it was I was just chanting or what I'm doing with this super interesting looking instrument here. And what I was doing is opening this session today with an invocation. And another way of looking at an invocation is understanding that it's an intention. So as we chant, and the mantra that I was doing, it's called the Guru Mantra. So we're just paying respects to all the teachers, to our gurus and the spiritual masters, just saying thank you for this knowledge, thank you for these teachings, and also setting an intention. So kind of like setting the vibration or setting the mood for whatever it is that is coming next. Yoga Sutras, the word sutra in Sanskrit means to thread. So what is it that Patanjali, our yoga philosopher, what is he threading together? He's threading together different texts from ancient scriptures, like the Bhagavad Gita, the Rig Vedas, and he's taken these scriptures together, threading them, to create what I like to say is a foundation for life, but also a foundation in helping us move closer into yoga. Yoga, most people think that it is physical practice, it's, meditation, and not that these people are wrong, but those are only two parts of what Patanjali has written as the 8 limbs of yoga, or Yoga Sutras. And in his book, he goes through a list of all these things. And so what we're going to discuss now is the beginning. What is yoga? So he says in Yoga Sutra 1.1, now, this is yoga as I have observed it in the natural world. And now, so what he's talking about is now, right now, we are in a different place in this moment than we have been before and than we ever will be in the future, because all we really have is this present moment. So he's saying, in this moment, this is yoga as I have observed it in the natural world. So now that you have come to this present moment, you've also come to a higher awareness. And what this higher awareness does is it allows you to view things in a different way than you may have ever seen them before, because you now have this internal light, or gaining consciousness, we could say. So now this is yoga as I've observed it in the natural world. So be open-minded in this moment to know that there's so many different ways, there's so many possibilities of looking at things. So moving on, in Yoga Sutra 1.2, he says here what yoga is. We're observing yoga right now in this moment, but do we truly understand what the yoga is? So in the next scripture, he says, when you stop identifying with your thoughts, fluctuations of the mind, then there is yoga, identity with self, which is samadhi, bliss, and ecstasy. When you stop identifying with your thoughts, the fluctuating mind, so many of us know and experience this on the regular, the mind going to this feels good or this feels bad. It's fluctuating, it's changing all the time. The moods, our emotions, from reactions and actions of other people, our thoughts. So he's saying that when you stop identifying with your mind, then there is yoga, identity with the true self. So he's getting kind of deep here, very, just right off the bat, he's getting deep in a way of saying, you know, because many of us, we go through our day with these thoughts and we think that these thoughts are who we are. But what he's clearly stating is that we have to separate from our thoughts to come into the true self. And understanding the self. What is the self? He says it is samadhi, it's bliss, it's ecstasy. So that there, he is telling us what this yoga is. It's to stop with the mind and step into your true self. And if we think about it, the mind, it's fluctuating all the time. We see things as good or bad. But what if you could see things not as good or bad, but that everything is just as it is and as it's meant to be? And that's why he's saying here, which is samadhi, bliss, happiness, and ecstasy. Because if you see everything that it is as it's supposed to be, you accept every experience, every circumstance, every response or reaction that is coming from people and situations around you. So that raises the next question. What and who is the self? How do we get into this ecstasy? How do we stop identifying with the fluctuating mind? And moving a few chapters forward, Patanjali says that identification with the fluctuations of the mind is stopped by practice and non-attachment. So for us to come into our true self and to stop having these fluctuating thoughts, which creates dis-ease in the body, we have to practice and be non-attached, which goes on to the next question of what is it that we're practicing? What is it that we are being non-attached from? The first two parts of the 8 limbs, we have what are called the restraints and the observances. And these restraints and the observances are what I believe to be these things to practice and to be non-attached from. So we want to continue, we want to stop identifying with the mind. But there's something very important here to really stop identifying with the mind, to really want to be with the true self, because people are so used to identifying with their thoughts and their emotions and reacting rather than responding. It's like almost like muscle memory for them. So Patanjali makes a very good point here in chapter 2, and I just want to read this before we get into a little bit deeper of what the 8 limbs are. And he says that you must be fueled by a burning desire to continuously study the self, which is only available in the present moment, and to devote yourself wholly to this effort. These are the actions to be taken to attain yoga. So now is the time for yoga that you are able to view it in this natural world with this higher consciousness, this more of an open mind. And we understand that we're clearing out the thoughts. We are not our thoughts. We want to come to the true self, but we have this muscle memory. So what is so crucial to coming into the true self and gaining this awareness and moving closer to this bliss, the samadhi, he says you must have a burning desire to study the self. You have to have a burning desire to want this awakening, to want this understanding, and a burning desire to want peace of mind and calmness, because like he's saying, our true self is peace. It's samadhi. So who wouldn't want that, right? So burning desire to want this peace, which is only available in the present moment. So right here, right now, we want to keep this awareness, keep this presence, keep the burning desire, and devote yourself to wanting this peace, to wanting this samadhi. And through doing this, you're able to attain yoga. You're able to every day wake up and know more about who you are and your purpose in this world and what is coming next for you. So we want to attain this yoga. We want to attain the true self. So we have to practice and be non-attached. And the 8 limbs is what dives into that. So we have the restraints, the observances, the seat, which is like the asanas, the physical movement, breath control, which is our breathing, our prana, staying connected to our life force, sense withdrawal, disconnecting from our senses, instead of being controlled by this smells good, that feels good, this looks good. Instead we're able to withdraw from going after those things, but rather observing them. Then we have concentration, which is clear focus, meditation, and then ecstasy, which is being in that higher state of consciousness, being in that samadhi, being in that true self. So before we dive deeper into the restraints and observances in these 8 limbs, he makes another very good point. Patanjali, he's our philosopher. He has so many good points. We could just, for years, study so much about the philosophy. And so I know I'm throwing a lot at you, but it's all going to tie together, and just really understand that these points he makes they're very extravagant. And so I'm going to just keep pointing them out so that you can understand. And the more that we go through this course, the more you'll understand how significant his words are with these points that I'm making. So he says here, we have this desire, all these things, but there's 5 things that hinder us from yoga. So we understand yoga is the true self. There's these things that kind of get in the way. And I'm going to read them to you here. It's misknowing, egoism, attachment to pleasure, hatred, and fear of death. So as we engage in those 5 things that I had just mentioned, that's actually keeping us from living in our truest and highest potential. And so I'm just going to read them again because it's so profound. Misknowing. How many times we think we know that somebody did this because of this, and really it was a misunderstanding, So we want to really try and better understand people and have an open mind. Egoism. We all have an ego, and we have a healthy ego and we have a not as healthy ego. And just understanding and really knowing what is the healthy ego rather than a non-healthy ego. Attachment to pleasure. That's why we have these sense withdrawals, because we have these senses to enjoy life, but we also don't want to be allowing these pleasures and these senses to be controlling our life, because we want to keep that consciousness. We want to keep that awareness. Hatred. Hatred is the opposite of love. As we connect to our higher consciousness, as we connect to love, that's what helps us to not have this fluctuating mind, but instead with love, we're able to see everything in a place of love, in a place where that this is what it's meant to be. And the last one here is fear of death. I feel that the fear of death is also so important, because so many people are attached to this physical. But as we dive into these yoga sutras, as we dive into the true self and into samadhi, we understand that we are much larger. We are something more profound than the physical body. So as we learn more about the self, we get out of this physical and understand more of the spiritual. So let go of your fears of death, because your spirit is always going to continue on. Your consciousness will always continue on as this physical, as all physical things do, they go back to dust. So, understanding more about those things that hinder us from yoga. The next thing after he says that is that these 5 hindrances are overcome by resolving them back to their source. So those hindrances, there's something deep inside people that really connects them to whatever these hindrances are. And what he's saying is to overcome them, to resolve these hindrances. You have to resolve them back to their source. And so you have to go back to the first time of, this misknowing or this misunderstanding, per se, that maybe when you were younger, you were in a situation or somebody wasn't understanding you. And therefore they had treated you in a way that was like, totally not understanding you and being dishonoring to you about not understanding you. So therefore you could be acting in a way towards others that when you don't understand them, you create this misknowing or this false belief about it. So we go back to that source, to that first time where you were feeling this feeling of being misunderstood, and resolving that. So we could dive into each and every one of those. With hatred, there's these 5 hindrances. I guess what I'm trying to get to the point of what Patanjali is saying is these are surface things. And beneath the surface is where we can resolve these hindrances and resolve them back to the source, back to the first time. We have this burning desire. We want the samadhi. We understand now that there's things that are hindering us from being in this samadhi. And we're understanding now that we have to go back. And that's what's going to get us now into the 8 limbs. And with our 8 limbs here, starting with the first one, the restraints. So the first 2, the restraints and the observances, they have 5 parts to them. The restraints are non-harming, truthfulness, non-stealing, continence, and greedlessness. So like I said before, in order to come to this yoga, we have to practice and be non-attached. So these things are the things to be non-attached from. People don't understand, sometimes they don't have this awareness, they're not being conscious that even just simply, intentionally killing a bug or something like that, that could be perceived as harming. Why did you really need to kill that bug? It really goes deeper. And then with truthfulness, we want to be non-attached people. We find sometimes that we can't be authentic and we're not being true with our words. Or non-stealing, a lot of people will say, like, of course I don't steal, but have we ever considered that there's something called stealing time? So we really want to look at the big picture here of each of these restraints. And with continence, it's just, the continence is having mindfulness as you connect with intimate partners. And greedlessness, that right there alone is like being non-attached, because people can become so greedy in what they have. But we need to know that there's an abundance of everything, that we don't need to stay gripped onto these things. So then going into the what's called the niyamas, or the observances, or what we want to practice. We have cleanliness, contentment, self-discipline, self-study, and devotion to God. So cleanliness. Some say that in order to raise your consciousness, it's not just this physical cleansing of, okay, I took a shower, I'm clean for the day. No, it is much more than that. It's much deeper. It's what foods are you putting into your body? What chemicals are you choosing to put into your body or not putting into your body? What music are you listening to? Is it high vibrational, or is it something that is filled with anger and, frustration? Is it something that's raising your consciousness? So it's not just cleanliness of taking a shower, it's cleanliness in the full mind, body, and spirit. Okay? Contentment. So many of us get caught up in this needing to have more, kind of like with the greedlessness. They're always like, I need more, I need more, I need more. There's this stimulation, there's this scrolling on Facebook or whatever it is. It's, not feeling content. So we want to be practicing contentment and understanding. And with contentment, it also gives us this appreciation for everything that we have and expressing gratitude. So then we have self-discipline. Self-discipline, some will call as, a lot of yogis practice what's called their daily sadhana, which is their self-discipline. They get up in the morning, they either do their prayers and bhajans, or they practice asana, which are the postures, or they go to a temple and they offer their time there. So this self-discipline, it's something where you have this routine all the time. Because as you create this self-discipline, it also allows you to really live in your true power and in your true self, so that you're not persuaded by this, so that you're not being pulled out of the present moment, out of the now. So that self-discipline, it really allows you to stay conscious and to stay present and to get better at it. Practice makes perfect. So then we have self-study. We understand a little bit now more of what the self is. So what the self-study is to do these things, to go back to the source of these 5 hindrances and resolve them, to understand and to practice things of being non-attached to those, the non-harming and the truthfulness, and the self-study, observing what it is you're putting in your body, observing what your surrounding is like, what your environment is like. So that is that self-study, is really studying the self and coming back into these things that serve you, rather than create chaos in the life or the mind or the body. And then the 5th one here is devotion to God. So God could, to you, to everyone, there's a different meaning of what God is and who God is. And what I think is so important about this devotion to God is that just like that self-discipline, that daily sadhana, with this self-discipline and getting up and having this routine, it gives you this sense of purpose, a sense of this enjoyment in life, because like just in the very beginning, we started with an invocation, we started with an intention. So with this devotion to God, it helps us to kind of get out of the self. I know it's kind of seems contradictory that we want to identify with the self, but we want to get rid of the self. And what I mean by, having this devotion to God helps you to get out of yourself. What I mean is the non-healthy ego self. Because as we devote our time or devote daily sadhana to this higher being, or to anyone, God could be everyone around you. We're all a reflection of God. So this devotion is allowing us to tap into love into awareness, into acceptance, and also more of that appreciation. And it helps us to just really do it without that ego, but instead with confidence. With somebody used to say to me, to be confidently humble. So with this devotion, it allows us to stay humble, because in that humility also comes more awareness and consciousness. So these are just the first two parts of what yoga is. Before we started, you maybe thought that, you know bits and pieces. The yoga is the asana, the poses, the meditation, the breathing. But so far, what we start to see is that yoga isn't even about what you're doing on your mat. It's about when you wake up, your first intention, your first thought, what is going on through the day, and these things to practice throughout the day. Then we get into the asana. So back in the day, when you study about different sages or gurus, what they used to do is sit in a meditative posture, and they would stay here for hours, days, maybe even months. And back then, during that time where we didn't have technology with computers and all these cars and all this traffic and all this overstimulation, people were able to sit in silence and reach that state of samadhi. But in today's day and age, as Patanjali knew, we are very stimulated with so many things. So with the asanas, as we do this physical practice, it allows us to get out some of that stimulation so that we can then come to a stillness and come to that meditative state of mind. So the asanas, after the seat or the asanas comes breath control, or otherwise known as pranayama. And prana we know as it's our vital energy, it's our life force, it's what gives us life. So with pranayama, this breath control, a very significant quote is, they say that your mind is the master of your emotions, but your breath is the master of your mind. So as we understand yoga and we know that we want to stop identifying with our thoughts or with the fluctuating mind, because if we understand more, our thoughts create this energetic frequency, and from there it creates an emotion. So it's like a thought creates the action or the reaction, which is the emotion. And by having these fluctuating thoughts and fluctuating emotions, that's what causes dis-ease in the body. And what is dis-ease? It's separation from the true self, which is ease, samadhi, bliss. So as we practice pranayama and we have this breath control, it allows us to master our thoughts instead of them fluctuating. And as we master those thoughts, we master these emotions so that we have this contentment, we have this peace of mind, we have this calmness and this awareness to stay focused in whatever it is that we're doing. So pranayama, it's very important. Then from there we have sense withdrawal. So another thing with the stimulation, as I was saying before, back then, there wasn't all these things stimulating our senses. So today's day and age, we have things like lottery tickets and all these fancy restaurants that give off all these lovely aromas as we drive by, and we have commercials which are so catching to the eye, and all these things. These are our senses. We have so many things pulling us towards our senses, and even over uses of alcohol and things like that. It really, we're being pulled in all these directions. So with sense withdrawal, how can we sit and stay in a meditative state if we are constantly being stimulated by our senses. So as we practice sense withdrawal, we're able to practice keeping our senses at bay and observing them rather than engaging in them. Okay, so from this sense withdrawal, we go into concentration. What is concentration? Again, just going over these 8 limbs, the last 2 are the meditation in ecstasy, which is the identity with the true self. And before we can even do meditation, we have to withdraw the senses and we have to find concentration. And with this concentration it's similar to the senses. So once we can stop identifying or withdraw from our senses, that gives us the ability to concentrate, to focus, to find one point to really fix our awareness and our attention. Because when the mind is focused and fixed in one place, all the monkey chatter, all that fluctuation starts to melt away. So then we can be in a state to come into a meditation, which that meditation is allowing ourselves this stillness, allowing ourselves to quiet the mind. And therefore, when the mind is quiet, it allows us to connect to this inner voice, this inner knowing inside that connects us back to source. And connecting back to source, that allows us to connect back to our true self. So with these 8 limbs, we have to practice these things. We have to be non-attached. We have a firm foundation here of Patanjali letting us know that these are the things to reach this higher state of consciousness, to go through life with peace of mind rather than with chaos. And we understand that you must have that burning desire right here, right now, in this moment, to come back to your true self, to come back to your awareness, and to come back to being connected to Source's energy. So with that, the next class, we will dive in a little bit more here and going through each sutra. But for now, let's really just allow all of this information to sink in, to settle in. And what I ask of you is to continue staying present from this point on, as Patanjali says. Now, this is yoga as I observed it in the natural world. So right here, from this point on, this moment right now, observe this world. Observe your thoughts, your words, your actions, your senses, all the things around you. And allow this to help you better understand as we will then dive into these Yoga Sutras even deeper and really allow ourselves to get closer to that true self. So what I want to close out today with is another little mantra here, because just the same as we set the intention, we pay this respect to the gurus, the teachers, the masters, we also want to pay respects at the end and say thank you. Thank you for all of this knowledge. Thank you for all of these teachings. And thank you for giving us this awareness as we begin this journey into the true self. So if you'd like to repeat after me or just listen. So this mantra, it's the first Yoga Sutra, 1-1. Now this is yoga as I have observed it in the natural world. Atta yoga anushashanam. Atta yoga anushashanam. Atta yoga anushashanam. Atta yoga anushashanam. seal this session today with Om Shanti Shanti, spreading peace. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Namaste.